I have a story to share with you. The Big Orange Splot by Daniel M. Pinkwater. Mr. Plumbeam lived on a neat street. Mr. Plumbeam lived on a street where all the houses looked the same. Everybody liked it that way, and the only thing they ever said was, "This is a neat street." Then one day a seagull came flying by, carrying a can of orange paint. No one knows why. And as he went over Mr. Plumbeam's house, he dropped that can of paint. No one knows why, but it left a huge orange splot on his roof. The neighbours started to talk. "Ooh, too bad. Mr. Plumbeam will have to paint his house again." "I suppose I will." But he didn't get to painting his house straight away. He took his time and started to think. The neighbours started to get very tired of that big orange splot. "Mr. Plumbeam, we do wish you'd get round to painting your house." "Okay." So Mr. Plumbeam got some blue paint and some white paint, and he set about painting at night because it was cooler. He painted the walls, he painted the roof, and he went to get more paint, purple paint, pink paint, green paint, and he painted all night. In the morning when the people came out, all the houses looked the same, except for Mr. Plumbeam's. It was like a rainbow, a jungle, an explosion. There were stripes. The big orange splot was still there, with small orange splots too. There were swirls, there were pretty ladies, there were steamrollers, there was a lion. "Mr. Plumbeam has popped his cork, flipped his wig, and blown his stack, dropped his stopper." The neighbours went away muttering. And that night, Mr. Plumbeam went out to the carpenter's shop. He got tools ready to work, which he did so at night, because it was cooler. And he built a clock tower, and on top he painted a big clock face. In the morning, "Mr. Plumbeam has mushed his lost his marbles, slipped his horser." They decided that they would pretend not to notice. That night Mr. Plumbeam went out again with his truck to the local garden centre and picked up baobab trees and bushes and palm trees and all sorts of things, and he got to work at night because it was cooler. And in the morning he had got a hammock set up between two trees, and he was swinging in it with his new pet alligator. "Plumbeam has gone too far. This used to be a neat street. What have you done to your house?" "My house is me, and I am it. My house is where I like to be, and it looks like all my dreams." The people went away and talked to the neighbour who lived right next door to Mr. Plumbeam. "Tell him that we all liked it before he changed his house. Tell him that his house has to be the same as ours, so we can have a neat street." The man went to see Mr. Plumbeam in the evening, and Mr. Plumbeam offered him lemonade. They sat and talked about why Mr. Plumbeam had done something so out of the ordinary. They talked all night, but enough time for his neighbour to go out while it was still cool and get paint and lumber himself. The next morning, there was a giant red and yellow and blue ship next to Mr. Plumbeam's house. "What have you done to your house?" "My house is me, and I am it. It's where I like to be, and it looks like all my dreams," said the neighbour, who had always loved ships.
He's just like Plumbeam.
He's got bees in his bonnet, bats in the belfry,
and nuts in his noodle.
Then one by one, each neighbour went to Mr. Plumbeam's house. He always offered them lemonade and sat underneath the trees. They discussed their dreams. They talked about how they might be reality, and the next morning they would set about to work. Each house became their dreams, one by one. Whenever a stranger came to the street, they would look up and down and say, "This is not a neat street." But everyone would say back,
"Our street is us, and we are it. It's where we like to be, and it looks like all our dreams. Our street is us, and we are it. It's where we like to be, and it looks like all our dreams."